So, welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Mitch Simpkins, for the podcast Wins for Widows, where you get practical guidance from professionals who are united, all of us, in helping you get back on your feet after experiencing the loss of a loved one. And together, we'll uncover the rooted question that you might be asking yourself: what now? And what do I do next? Today, I am excited to introduce you all to Michelle Wilson. Michelle is an estate attorney based out of Cumming, Georgia, and she's experienced specializing guiding widows and elder care and other special needs and through estate planning and elder care, and brings some real practical advice and heartfelt support to women facing big life challenges. In my prior conversation with you, Michelle, you are so warm and kind, and I feel that over the Zoom. I can only imagine how it is for people that are right in front of you. So maybe it's that wonderful Georgia spirit that you have.
It could be, right? We do get a lot more sunshine than in some other states, maybe.
You do. And I think it's inbred right in you, right?
You know, we've had a lot of people move into my area of town since I grew up here.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting at a dentist office and I just started conversing with a lady that came in next to me and asked her how she was doing. And she told me she had just moved here. And I asked her if she needed any recommendations to any place. And she seemed a little uncomfortable. Like, it was odd to have a stranger take an interest like that.
I've been down in your part of the country, and you're very open and very warm, and I loved it. We definitely enjoyed it. Yeah. So Michelle and I have talked before, and we've gone through a few things of her background, and so today we're just going to talk about a few of the things that we felt will be helpful to those of you who have lost, and we're going to learn from Michelle from her experience. So first question, Michelle, you mentioned helping widows and those that have gone through this loss rediscover their value and what they really love. So can you share some practical steps or stories from your experience that help women build a sense of purpose and identity after their loss, even outside of their particular financial situation?
I'd love to, Mitch. And I'm going to really stick to probably more practical guidance for this one because I've got some good stories for some of your later questions. And I know we're going to be a little bit limited on time. So let me begin by saying, when anyone comes into the office who's experienced a loss, and that could be death or something like divorce, right? That's also a loss.
Yeah.
We always encourage them to practice gratitude, and having that practice of gratitude, spending 5 minutes in the morning thinking of something you can feel grateful for. And to help them with that, we always give them this book. Any of your listeners can get online on Amazon. It's sold by National Geographic, and it's called 365 Days of Gratitude. And it's non-religious. It just has a really like a grateful or gratitude quote on a page with a beautiful picture because it's National Geographic. And it's just a good way to kind of get your mind centered on something good to start your day. And also, I would say nothing makes you feel better than doing something for someone else in a faster way, right? So when you're feeling really down, being able to reach out and help somebody else with something, even if it's something small, and trying new things, going back to old things that maybe you haven't had time to do in a while. For a lot of our widows that ended up taking a lot of care of their spouse over the last years of their spouse's life,
Very
a lot
hard.
of times it's been a really long time since they read a good book or
Yeah.
taken a walk or gone to a favorite spot on the beach, right? And then the other thing I think that really helps a lot, and I have been looking at starting a club within the firm too for our widows and our widowers, is joining a book club or something social, a women's Bible study, a gardening group, doing activities with a local senior center if you're at an age where you can do that, and just forcing yourself to get dressed and get up and get out of the house and
Yeah.
participate in what's going on in the world
Yeah.
can really help.
It's hard. It's hard to wake up that morning. It's
Hmm.
hard to wake up every morning after that. One of my clients, she didn't need to work, but after the passing of her partner, she continued to work. And I said, "Why are you still working?" She said, "Because it gets me up, gets me out of bed. And if not, like, I don't really even want to get out of bed."
Yeah,
Yeah, really, really, that's great. Really good advice.
it can help.
Yeah, I really love that. Yeah, thank you. Do you see initially, like when they come into you, how do you work with them? What do you do initially when that grief is so much, so deep, so hard that acting and moving and doing anything, especially like anything financial or legal, is just a stretch. How do you help them get to the point where they're okay doing it?
Well, I think it's not so much getting them to a point. I think the first step, Mitch, is stopping and just listening,
Mm,
hearing them,
good.
and asking them to tell you stories about the person that they lost,
Mm,
because
love
usually
that.
there's some amazing stories. If I could collect stories and get paid to do it, I would do nothing but talk to my clients about stories.
Very cool.
Nothing but.
Very cool.
A lot of times when someone comes to me and grief is that fresh too, they're usually coming with someone else, a daughter, a son, a neighbor, someone who really cares a lot about them and
Nice.
maybe has been helping them, if the loss happened maybe in the last week or two, maybe they're in for the funeral and they're together to help mom sort through things.
Yeah,
The other thing we do is keep it simple, right? We're not going to tell them all the different things we're going to do. We're going to start with the very first step.
good. Yeah,
And then we can follow up with them and see how they're doing with the first step. And if the first step is still too hard, say it's an organizational step, figuring out what they even owned. Because like you said when we talked last time, a lot of times a widow doesn't even know what's going on in the finances because
yeah,
the husband's been doing it.
for sure.
So maybe a child can help them organize documents and check email. Maybe we can call a professional organizer to come in and help with the paperwork. And oftentimes we tell them just to wait on the other stuff. Like if going through the closet and pulling out clothes is too soon, just let us be there. There's no rush. There's absolutely no rush.
Yeah,
You
I
want
love that.
to family.
It's baby steps. It's baby steps, and it has to be done really slowly. And there's only a certain bandwidth. There's a bandwidth, and the grief takes up most of it. And so anything beyond that is usually very small. What are you seeing? I'm curious, Georgia. I'm not familiar. I mean, familiar with a lot of women's organizations that support widows. Are there any specific back there by you that you've heard of that they're associated with that they're getting some value? Because you're really hitting on a super cool topic and an important theme, I think, around support. And that includes
Now you're
family and
asking
it
me
includes
questions.
support groups, right?
Sure. Yeah. So support groups kind of come and go,
Okay.
right? I think we had a lot more support groups before COVID. And after COVID, I think some of those just didn't make it through
Mm,
and
mm,
survive.
yeah.
The hospital usually offers some support groups. Where my office is located, there's a very active senior services community, and they have master gardeners come out. They have different speakers that come out. They have symphony come out and march and do like a St. Patrick's Day concert. So there's a lot of different things you can get involved in, but it not necessarily specifically focused on widows, right? But if you're in a church, there's usually a women's ministry of some kind. There is a couple of women's social clubs that are in this area. So it really kind of depends on what you're into. I know there's some quilting circles, for example, right? If
There you
if
go.
there's some if your hobby is quilting. So a lot of times it surrounds your hobby. There's lots of book clubs. We've got one of the busiest libraries in the whole state of Georgia in our county. And there's several book clubs that people can come and be a part of. And one of them, you can just read whatever book you want and then comment on it in the book club, which I think is great. You don't have to read what everybody else is
Oh,
reading.
really? Oh, cool.
Yeah,
That's very cool. No, I've never heard of that. That's awesome. Yeah, support and having love around you and people around you is so critical. And professional support. Obviously, you're an attorney. I'm a financial advisor. There's many other professionals that can help take a lot of that load off because it's heavy,
it is.
especially if the money and the management of it is somewhat new.
Well, that's true, but I mean, I'm sure you tell a lot of your clients that there don't need to be a lot of decisions fast. With investing, a lot of times your goal is to buy and hold, not to do a bunch of day trading. So really it's a matter of more question of, does your client have all the different advisors around her that she needs to feel comfortable? And I usually tell my widows the story of Henry Ford, right? He had an 8th grade education and he created a multi-million dollar empire around automobile manufacturing. How did he do it? Because he was courageous enough to hire a bunch of people way smarter than him.
Interesting.
And then he kind of sat in the accountability chair, right?
Yeah.
Holding them
Yeah.
accountable. And so, the first step to do to take would be to listen, right? And to get, help help them take the time they need to get in touch with what's important to them. Once we know what's important to them, then making sure they have the people around them on their team that can surround them and support them.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of Kathleen Reel. She's going to be on the podcast very soon. She's amazing. I happened to I connected with her last week, and I had a great conversation with her. She's actually on the podcast, I think, week after next. She's
Cool.
written a book called Moving Forward on Your Own: A Financial Guide for Widows.
Nice.
Amazing, excellent. One of the things that she told me that I really loved is she says she helps widows think about things that need to be done now,
Mhm.
soon, and later.
Mhm.
I love that, and so she just kinda says, like, "Help prioritize it. Give baby steps and little bites because it's overwhelming already," and so to help kind of break that out is a big piece of that, so,
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
Oh, that's awesome. So, many listeners are also worried about running out of money or losing their assets, right, as they age. Can you walk us through how asset protection trusts and some other proactive planning can help secure long-term care options for
Sure.
widows? Because that's obviously a big concern, right? One of the things I see in people's plans that can derail it is long-term care costs. Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean,
Educate us
that's
on that.
every time. They lose their spouse, and then a lot of times their income is going to decrease because now they're on the higher of the two Social Security amounts. They no longer have some of the same advantages tax wise of being married, and now they no longer can shift money to a spouse in order to qualify for different programs. So it can often be harder to get into various programs. I think the key for a lot of women in those situations is to ask questions early because the proactive planning side allows us to keep control of what happens to the most valuable thing that you have, for example, your house, so that Medicaid's rules don't impact when you have to sell and when you have to get rid of the money or spin down requirements, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's really how having something like an asset protection trust can help because you can create this trust and put the people you love and know and trust in charge of it. And after 5 years, you don't have to tell Medicaid that you own it anymore. And that's really becoming more critical for clients with smaller estates now because if you need Medicaid, and Medicaid is not just nursing home benefits, there's also a caregiver in the home benefit as well. In Georgia, Medicaid now has an estate claim for when you pass away. They can come back and get reimbursed and they're treated with the same priority as the federal and state tax revenue offices.
Mm.
So it really puts families in a pickle sometimes when the only asset, the house, ends up getting sucked up by a Medicaid reimbursement claim that might be $100,000 or 200,000, and that was all the equity that was left in the house.
And is there a look back period of that, Michelle? Like,
Up
is
to
it
five
it's 5
years.
year, and
So
so
you
it's
want to
5 years for anything. Okay.
And a look back period, just real quick, Mitch, for your listeners that don't
Yeah,
know, when
please.
you apply for Medicaid, Medicaid is going to ask the question, have you given away anything that could have been used for your care in the last 5 years? And by planning more than 5 years ahead of time and giving your house, for example, to the trust 6 years ahead, maybe, or 7 years ahead, you can say truthfully and honestly when you apply for Medicaid that, no, I haven't done anything like that in the last 5 years. Do you see what I mean? So we're using a strategy to get the best of both worlds because even if mom moves out of the house and the house is sold, now that house that was exempt for Medicaid is countable. It's a big pile of money, right? But Medicaid's rule says you have to get rid of that money in 30 days or you get kicked out of benefits. But if you use a trust, your kids don't have to get rid of the money in 30 days. They can invest it. And let's say you want to move to assisted living and still have your Medicaid caregiver or apply for a Medicaid caregiver there. You can have assisted living be paid partly by your trust if your income doesn't cover it. And then Medicaid can help supply that extra caregiver that can keep you from moving into memory care or skilled nursing for a longer period of time.
So, Michelle, give us an example. Tell us how it worked, how it's worked in one of your
An
clients'
example.
cases, and
Okay.
how they were
Sure.
able to preserve that asset and utilize it where they might have not otherwise been able to for their long-term care.
So I'm going to give you a veterans benefits example. We had a mom who was staying in Gainesville, Georgia. She was in assisted living. She had dementia, and they were moving her to memory care. But to keep her in memory care, they needed another caregiver to be able to be with her because she was easily agitated when she was alone too long. And they had a caregiver they really loved, but in order to keep being able to afford to pay the caregiver, they needed the VA aid and attendance benefit. It's a pension benefit for wartime veterans. It's like a thank you for your service. And because she was the widow of a veteran, the amount that we could get from the VA was enough to keep the caregiver employed. And we used the Asset Protection Trust to save their family farm from being taken or having to be sold so that they could qualify for the benefit. So we put the family farm and the
Interesting.
asset protection trust early. They rehabbed the barn so they could rent the apartment in the barn and provide additional income to help keep mom in assisted living.
Wow.
Between the rental of the barn in the trust and the VA benefit, which was income tax free for life, she lived out her days in that facility. And the family later invited me to the funeral, where I learned that when she first moved to Georgia, she was a really great friend and demonstrated that she was a really great friend when her neighbor put out a trap for a skunk or for a cat and got the skunk in the trap instead. And she put on coveralls and went to her neighbor's house, the skunk out for them.
That's a true neighbor right
They weren't
there.
too scared.
That is a true neighbor.
But the family was really grateful that they met me because by using the plan, we were able to allow them to keep that farm that had been in the family for 3 generations.
Interesting. So she was immediately able to protect that out of her trust, basically. Is it irrevocable?
Yes,
It is
but
irrevocable. Okay.
it's irrevocable, but it's defective on purpose because we wanna keep certain tax advantages.
Okay.
So it's called an intentionally defective
Intentionally
grantor
defective
trust is
grantor
the
trust.
actual
Yes. Yes.
name.
Yes. Okay.
But it is an irrevocable trust, but people don't have to be too scared of that anymore because the rules have changed on that.
Mm.
Beneficiaries by agreement can actually make a change and the judge has to comply. So even irrevocable trusts are not wholly irrevocable anymore in Georgia. Now that's Georgia
Okay.
rules. So
That's
if your
Georgia
listeners are not
rules
in
might
Georgia,
change. Okay.
the rules might be different.
Yeah. So yeah, beware of that. If you do that, like it could be irrevocable.
Check with a local attorney.
You may not be getting control back of it again. But in Georgia, it sounds like you can. There's some flexibility there.
You wouldn't get control back, but listen, I mean, if your goal is someday to give an inheritance to your kids, and if their house is the main asset that you have and you want to be able to give that to them,
Mm-hmm.
essentially the asset protection trust is simply moving forward the gift, but they don't get actual possession until you've passed away.
See.
So
I see.
it's
So it still
essentially
is in your control, in
it's
essence.
yeah, it's just
No
an
different than it would have been before.
yeah,
I
an
love that.
earlier implementation or starting point for that estate planning goal.
Very cool. Have you ever seen clients use the asset value of a home within that to help with long-term care expenses? Or I guess it would be outside the trust, right? You wouldn't do that outside the trust.
When you say use the asset value to help with expenses, what are
Asset
you
value, because
referring
one of the things we talk about a lot with long-term care is that your house can become the long-term care payment, if you will.
So you sell the house and pay for long-term care from the proceeds of the sale?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that a lot. And that's what I mean by the house is exempt when you want to apply for Medicaid, but then let's say you apply and get approved, then you need to sell your house and move to a facility style of care with your caregiver. If you don't spend all of the proceeds within 30 days, you'd get kicked out of the benefit if you don't have a trust. But if you have a trust, you maintain the control and it's your decision to spend it when you want to spend it, essentially, right? Like your kids, if they're trustees, they don't have to spend it all in 30 days. They can invest it and drip on you and the assisted living $1,000 a month to help you stay there for the
Okay,
next 4
okay.
years, right?
So it can go so you can still you can still have access then to the
Correct.
asset just out of your estate-ish as far as Medicaid rules go.
So here's what happens. The house goes to the trust, the house gets sold. The money gets distributed to the kids. The kids give a gift to the assisted living. They
Okay,
never give a gift to mom. Cash never goes to mom
interesting.
into mom's hands.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. That's
Love
the key thing. Don't give mom money.
that kinda defeats the whole
It's
purpose then.
similar to, I don't know if you'll have this rule where you are, but here in Georgia, you can actually give money to a program that helps students in areas where public school systems are failing go to private school. And your money that you donate, it offsets your state income taxes. So it's dollar for dollar offset. So if I know my state income taxes are going to be $1,800, I'd much rather
Good
pay
idea.
to give a scholarship to a kid that could be at risk, right? And in this case, the kids are kind of doing that too. Kids don't want to be obligated to pay for mom to be in assisted living. They can't. They're raising their own kids. A lot of them don't have the financial capability to do that,
Yep,
but they do want to
yep.
be able to help. And if being able to help means I can be a trustee and help make sure mom's money from the sale of the house goes to help pay for assisted living, most kids are all over that. They want that.
Yeah,
They want mom to have a good life.
yeah. No, I love that. That's a great tool. Thank you for explaining it so well and for the
I hope
example.
so. If you need a different explanation, tell them they can reach out to me and I'll explain it again.
No, it's great. That's awesome. Also, in your practice, you help clients preserve not just wealth, but also their legacy, right? Sometimes through written letters or other creative tools. How can widows use these types of approaches or others that you have to ensure that their values, experiences, and their wishes are passed on and honored after their
Yeah.
death?
Yeah, so I love this question, and I'm gonna use that same line if it's okay with you, preserving legacy and not just wealth. I think that's a great way to look at it. When we talked on the phone before, I told you that I believe that the most important legacy all of us have is the life experience that we've accumulated. And even if your listeners are listening and they don't have children or they have children who are estranged from them, they still have a message for the other humans that they're someday going to leave behind. So they can ask themselves, if I had one message for humanity, what would it be? And just think about what is the one thing that I would hope that no other human would need to have to go
Mm,
through that I
mm,
went through.
mm.
Oftentimes, too, families are torn apart by past conflicts and prejudices, right? So you've probably heard somebody say, well, that's why they got that job. They were always the favorite kid, right?
Are you saying parents actually have favorite children?
I don't know how many would admit it, but I'm pretty sure that's true.
At least not to their kids, for sure.
Right, right. I'm sure it's not you. It's probably
No,
other
no, no, no.
parents, right?
That's other people. Other people would do that.
But by writing letters, you can change a child's perspective from the assumption of what they think was the reasoning behind mom and dad's decision to a letter from mom and dad with the actual reasoning why they made the decision the way they did, right? And word in a way that is not demeaning or condemning or negative, right? You're wording it in a positive and loving way. And it's a great way to say, I love you to your kids one last time, right? I believe it's a way to keep families together because you shouldn't be simply deciding in a plan what percentage gets given to which child, right?
Yeah.
On accumulated wealth. We need to be communicating that message that's in our hearts and to and for the people that we love. So you can do that in a letter. You can describe the things you're proud of them for, doing or accomplishing or surviving. You can tell stories that maybe they've never heard. And we've already talked about this a little bit, but I have to tell you, I love asking couples that have been married a while how they met and what their secret to a long marriage is. And I think I have the very first story of online dating, if you want to hear that one.
Very cool. Yes, please. Yeah.
And on more than one occasion, the kids have never heard that story, which is really
That's very
cool,
cool.
right?
Very cool. Looking back, how old are these people?
World War One, before the
Okay, that
internet.
all right. I don't remember there
So
being internet back then, but
there
okay.
wasn't internet. So this would have
Yeah.
been like the
Yeah.
first type of online dating
Yeah.
back before internet, right?
Yeah,
So
let's hear it.
the lovely wife, and these, by the way, this couple had been married for like 54 years when they were in my
Okay.
office, right? They were
Yeah.
just still in love with each other. She wrote her name and address on an apple crate that was bound for Normandy. And a private that was in the army there saw her address on the apple crate and started writing her letters. 6 weeks later, he comes, like 6 weeks, no, 6 months later, he comes home for 1 week of leave, Mitch. And he goes to her house, meets her parents, picks her up, takes her to his house,
No way.
introduces her to his parents, and gets married. 3 weeks.
No
And they're
way. From
at
the first time
war.
that they met to the time they got married?
So they had been writing letters for like 6 months or
Okay.
so. So like I
Okay.
think they've
Of
been
course.
writing letters for a while. So he goes back to the war and after the war comes home and then they move to South Carolina together and they live out the next 54 years of their lives.
You
And I mean, don't you think that's kind of like before people used to write letters before the internet?
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
kind of like the
Yeah.
first online dating
It was a little
story
slower
ever.
than the internet. It probably
Right.
didn't get
Definitely
through as
slower.
fast, but the effect is the same. That's probably the first online dating
Right?
thing going on as well. That's pretty that's awesome. No, that's funny. I know in Utah, like, we're known to get married very early and very
Mm,
quickly, but
mhm.
3 weeks, I don't know that I've heard a 3-week story, so
Well, I mean, I guess if you consider the 6 months of letter writing as part of
sure.
their courtship, maybe it wasn't super, super fast,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah.
That's awesome. What a great story. Well, you've written a book, right? You've written a book around that
Yep. I don't know if that's showing up.
to your daughter, maybe to the right, just a sketch? Yeah. Tell us about that.
So the book is called So I Can Love You Longer, A Mother's Message to Her Daughter.
Mm,
And in 2017, I found out I had the genetic markers for breast and ovarian cancer.
mm,
And I decided, being self employed, that I wanted to be proactive and get the surgeries first so I wouldn't get cancer. But the breast mastectomy cancer is kind of a scary cancer, right? Like it's pretty involved. And I was a little concerned because I'm a single mom and that she would end up possibly, if something bad were to happen in that surgery, living with her father through all of her very moldable teen years without her mom,
Yeah.
right? And so I hired a writing coach and I said, look, I have all these topics I really want to be able to put down in writing for her. How can I do it? And so we organized it into months. And so every month has a theme.
Hmm.
So for instance, October is about dealing with failure, how to deal with failure. January is about dreaming. A lot of us do vision boards that time of year and think about what we accomplished the year before, right?
Very
So
cool. Very
it's some stories of me growing up, some stories of us together,
so fun.
and a lot of book recommendations and activities at the end of each chapter. And I'm going to send you our Love Legacy Mad Lib that I put together for a workshop last February. So if any of your listeners want to try out writing a letter, but they're scared to write it themselves,
Yeah.
this is an easy fill in the blank option
Okay.
that you can do with your spouse. And it kind of it's going to give your listeners that feeling of understanding of how the heartstrings are so important in making an estate plan. So I published it not for her, because obviously I didn't have to publish a book for my 8-year-old daughter, right, to read it. But I published it as an example to my clients
Nice.
because I feel like it's so important for them to write their own. And maybe if they could see an example, they would be inspired to do it themselves.
Love that. Love that. That's
It'll
so
make the
cool.
world a better place, I think.
That's so cool. I love that. I love doing that and giving information. I know even before we started, we talked about I call my parents occasionally because they don't love to
Mhm.
write, and I ask them questions. Hey, tell me about your childhood. Tell me what, and I'm recording it, and I'm going to use that later. And it's so important to do that. Tell me this too, kind of from an illegal standpoint and from a document and a continuation. Like, how do you talk to people about carrying on that legacy so that it happens, right? There's really no question whether it's going to happen or not because it's in a legal document. Tell me a little
Mm.
about that. What have
Sometimes
you had some experiences with that as well?
Sometimes it's in a legal document, Mitch, and sometimes it's not. It really depends, right? Sometimes it's in a letter, sometimes it's in a combination of documents. So I oftentimes motivate clients to think about. So the first step is motivating somebody to think about what do they want to happen and because we don't think
Yeah,
operationally, right?
yeah,
We think just to the next step and we say, okay, we're done. We don't have to
yeah.
think about this anymore.
Right, and you don't think you're going to die ever, so
A lot of
to
people
go
don't like to
there,
think about that, yes.
yeah,
So, part of my job, I guess, is to scare people a little bit, and tell them stories about what happened to people who didn't plan,
yeah,
right, and didn't write that legacy down, and I've got a sad story I can share about that I think would be impactful, but the other piece of it is to ask a simple question: "What kind of impact do you want your money to have on this world?
love
What's
that question.
important to you?" Right? Because so many years of our lives are spent just surviving and getting the kids through high school and getting them through
Yeah,
college and getting them independent and
yeah,
then, being with your spouse and supporting your spouse and getting yourself through all your health issues. How many times do we realize that we haven't looked up to take a breath of fresh air and remember who we are?
mm,
How
mm,
many of us actually have thought about what our values are? And there's this really cool exercise your listeners could try, which I don't have in my notes, but we'll give it to them anyway. You can write down the top 6 or 7 heroes in your life on the left-hand side of a piece of paper, and then write down all the things about each one of those heroes that you admire,
mm,
right?
mm,
And here's the beautiful part of this exercise. After you finish doing that, the reason why those came to mind for you is because you already have those values.
hmm,
You
hmm,
are those values.
that's a cool thought.
And so for people going through loss, where they're feeling like life isn't worth it anymore, sometimes that exercise helps a person realize what they've accomplished or what is important to them, right? You can also write a letter to your old self. That's another great exercise, especially for people who've walked with a spouse through something long term like
Yeah,
MS or dementia,
yeah,
and
where
tell
they've
your
kinda
younger
lost
self
themselves.
like how encourage. What would you say to your younger self to encourage them to get through this next phase that they're about to face?
Yeah, yeah,
And then you realize what you've actually been through. Writing this book was really healing for me, right? It's actually said by other professionals on this kind of thing that it's more healing for the writer than it is for the reader.
love it. Tell me your story. You had a story that you said
Oh,
would be
yes.
motivating. I
It
wanna
is going to be
see
motivating,
some
but
motivation.
you might need a Kleenex. So if listeners are listening, get your Kleenex.
I've got a box. I'll bring
Excellent.
my
Nice
box
one.
out.
So I had a lady who was a client, she had throat cancer, and it was pretty far along, stage 3. She was still doing chemo, there was still some hope that she would get through it. She wanted to make a change to her will, and she didn't have very much. Really, the only asset she had was her condo. And she had one daughter here locally and one daughter out of state. The daughter here was doing all the caregiving, taking her to doctor's appointments, all the things. And she wanted to give the condo to her daughter here because of all the work she'd been doing for her. She still loved both of her daughters equally, right? She still loved them all equally, but she just felt like the right thing to do was to give the condo to her daughter here. Well, she ended up passing away before we could get the change to her will done. And her daughter from out of state flew in for the funeral service, and she actually pulled me to the side at my office when she was in town and said, I just really have to ask you if you knew why my mom was going to give the condo to my sister. Was it because she didn't love me
Mm,
anymore?
mm,
Right? And I couldn't tell her what mom actually said because of attorney-client confidentiality, but what I could
right,
tell her was,
right.
"No, it wasn't because your mom didn't love you. It was because your mom felt obligated because of all the care and time that your other sister had given to her, that she deserved to have some kind of compensation for that." And the moment there, Mitch, like the impact on her to be able to pass that message to her. Now
Huge,
think about it. What if mom
huge.
hadn't talked to an attorney like me and she never found out why mom was gonna pass the condo to her sister?
Mm, mm, mm.
Imagine going through life thinking your mom didn't love you anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
And one letter could have fixed that. In
yeah,
fact, I could have, and I kind of kicked myself for not asking her this. Like, I should have just recorded her saying that. Like, this is why I want to give it to my daughter here. And it's not because I don't love my other daughter any
yeah.
less. If I had just recorded that, even in her words, it would have had
Would have
huge
been so
impact.
cool. No, I love that. We think that money doesn't show love and that it's not received or not or received or not received based on what we give. With our children, still is a tie. It's a tie to that love, right? Whether you intend it to be or not. And none of us intend it to be, and we all want to make it as fair and equitable as we can. But boy, it's hard to balance that out sometimes, and, there's obviously we could probably go on and on about fairness and equity and
But it's
equality.
not emotional, right? If you're
Yeah,
talking fairness and equity,
it
you're
is.
excluding emotion. And I just
Right.
finished a book that you might have read already called The Psychology of Money.
I love it.
And
One
in
of my
it,
faves, yes.
he goes into the whole fact that you're going to do things with money that don't make sense because you're an emotional person and that's a normal, natural part of you. And I think in the legal world, a lot of attorneys just focus on the objective side because focusing on the emotional side can get messy. And because a lot of us don't want to go there. It's
Mm,
hard to go where the
that's hard to be like,
feels, right?
yep, yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard to go there. And a lot of people are a little afraid to be that vulnerable with
yep.
someone.
But money is emotional.
It's very emotional.
And the thing I always tell people and my clients is, you have a relationship with money, whether you like it or not. And it could be a great relationship, it could be a terrible relationship. But that relationship that you have with that money can impact the relationship then that you have with the people around you. And understanding how you interact with money can help you understand how it might be received well or not well by your kids or others around you, and
Well, remember, other
that's
people's
amazing.
reactions are based on their emotional state, not your emotional state.
Whether you attend it or not, they have their own perception, and it's gonna come through with what you do.
Correct. There was a famous American literature, or Bernard Shaw had a quote about communication, and he said, "The surprising thing about communication is how often it doesn't happen." Communication has to be more than just telling someone something, right?
It does,
They
it
have to
does.
hear you and listen and
Yes, yes,
internalize it,
yes.
and then decide what they're going to do about it
Yep,
or
yep,
not do about it.
yep.
I don't think we really effectively communicate very often.
No, and there's perceptions that you don't understand, and when we really don't ask what those are, or even care to think about what those might be, and how we might get ahead of it, I think you see this probably a lot more than I do with the states after they're being dissolved and distributed, how that all affects it, right? So, no, I'd love to God, we need 2 more hours to
We
do that
could, right?
topic.
Because I mean, that's why they say probate can be worse than a divorce because that's when all those old assumptions come bubbling
Yeah,
up to the
totally,
surface, right? All those
totally,
feelings when you were growing up.
totally. No, I
Yeah,
love it.
we'll have to talk again later about
Yes,
that.
for sure, for sure. We'll start another podcast doing
There
that,
you go.
so the emotional and behavioral aspects of money. All right. So last question here. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see that widows and their families are making during elder care or estate planning? And what tips do you have to avoid those pitfalls and ensure that those families aren't left vulnerable or overwhelmed? Because I see on the backside over the years with clients that have died, I see the successor trustees take this on, and it's not an easy task. So what do? Michelle,
So,
how do you make it so that it's an easy transition for them?
well, the first question you had is common mistakes. And common mistakes is waiting too late for most people, or simply telling yourself that you're not valuable enough to be worthy of a plan. And that's where I think a lot of us, that belief of value coming from money can really hurt us because we don't ask enough questions to enough people. So, what I would recommend is first you've got a plan. And if you're not sure who to plan with, you're going to need to ask, and meet with attorneys until you find one you're comfortable working with, right? Maybe it's 3 or 4 different appointments. Maybe you pay for 1 or 2 consultations. That's totally fine. You need, same thing with doctors who are specialists, right? Before a surgery, are you only going to talk to one surgeon? No, I talked to 4 before I hired one. I totally get it if people want to talk to more than one person, and you should. Once you find somebody you want to work with, then you need to keep updated. Schedule follow-up appointments every 2 or 3 years, or when something big happens. In my practice, it's usually the 5 Ds. I add a sixth one on: diagnosis, decade, death, divorce, decline, or a big decision, right?
Very cool.
So anytime any of the D's happen, you want to talk to an estate planning attorney and update your plan. It's like going to the dentist, just schedule it, right? And stay on that attorney's newsletter list. Go to their workshops and events. Listen to their podcast if they have one like this one. Stay up to date on the changes so that you don't feel like you're going to be caught off guard next time you go meet with them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's, I often describe being an estate planner as like being a dentist with patients who have cavities and zero pain until they're dead. And then it's too late to fix it,
Yeah.
right? With estate planning, you're never too old, but you may be too late. So really, I think the thing to do is to put it in the calendar, because if you've ever read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the important items never get reached because we're always doing the easy, quick things or the urgent,
Mm, yeah.
dumpster fire things, right? And we never get to the important stuff. And I know I don't get to the important stuff unless I schedule it on my calendar. And so my team knows if it's not on my calendar, it's not happening,
Mm,
right?
mm, mm.
So that's what I think clients should do. And you're
Is it worthiness, Michelle? Is it worthiness that stops people from doing it? Because they don't feel like they deserve
I
it,
think
that they're
sometimes
worthy
it
of it?
is because words like estate people have in their head that is for people who are more wealthy than they are.
Interesting. Okay.
I feel like for some people it is.
Okay.
For some people, it may be just an excuse because they don't want to deal with it and they want to procrastinate because they don't want to deal with death and dying.
Yeah.
Right? They're afraid of the conversation. And the nice thing about coming to somebody like me, like us, we were actually working on our core values this morning. And one of our core values is, we're fun and we've got a little weirdness going on. We're going to tell you stories that maybe make you blush, maybe make you laugh. Usually we're going to laugh 2 or 3 times during the meeting. And people usually leave saying, I really wasn't looking forward to this, but this was way more fun than I expected, right?
She made estate planning actually cool.
I know. Like, I have a standing joke that I tell as long as people are not going to be too sensitive, because I think we should have fun and it should be a fun thing because we're taking control of what our future is going to look like. And it feels a lot better knowing who's going to be in that driver's seat than rolling the dice and seeing who decides to apply later.
And it takes discipline, and sometimes it costs you money.
It does.
But
You're
when you put your
investing.
money out, it's worth it. And to me, I tell people it's a gift to your successor trustee.
It is.
And
And
if
it's
you love
less
the kid that's
expensive.
doing your estate, give them a gift and take care of the plan and do it so that
Correct.
it's not so hard for them upon your passing.
Yeah, and it's less expensive for you to do it. Why? Because you already know where the things are,
Yeah.
right? Or if you just lost your husband who took care of all the documents, well, you know what drawer they're in, probably in the desk, right? Or you might have heard him talk about different banks. So it's much easier for someone who's more familiar to organize that than to wait until later. And let me tell you, if you wait until later, disaster can happen. And sometimes it's too late. And all we have to do is we have to ride it out, right? We're in the middle of the storm at that point. There's really no way out but through.
Yeah.
And I would rather people not be in that storm situation where they've got to just go
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add here too, and you probably see this as well, I spend a lot of time up front with my clients, especially as they get older. I'll go to their house. I'll say, hey, bring everything you got. And we'll sit in the front room and we're going through documents. I'm scanning stuff. I'm asking questions. What about this? What about this? What about this? Right? Hours and hours trying to help that. Inevitably, I still don't have a case where it went perfectly.
Well, because
There's
we're all
always
human and
something
life
that
is
pops
subject
out.
to
You're like, "Oh,
change.
we didn't know that was happening."
Yep, yep, you do the best you can, and I tell people that, there's 3 different things that are always constants in life: taxes, death, and change, right? And even if we don't change financially a lot, we're still changing as people, and what's important to us and how we make decisions change. So if you think to yourself, 10 years ago, the 10-year younger Mitch, would he make decisions the same way that the current Mitch would make decisions? What about 20 years ago? Probably
Hopefully,
not, right?
hopefully I've gotten better.
Right.
Yeah,
Like with practice, we get better, right? And our priorities change. And so it's totally normal for things not to be perfect. But still, even if your plan isn't perfect, you at least have an outline and you've got backup plans in your plan to maybe cover some of those scenarios that could pop up in the
that's
future.
good. No, I love that. No, the work that you do is so critical. It's so beneficial. And the one that benefits the most are the people who are left behind by those who love them enough while they're alive to give them a gift of preparation so that it's easier
Absolutely.
for them.
Yeah, and it makes it smoother for, you can have the most amazing advisor, but if you don't have, if you have to wait, like right now in Fulton County, we have to wait a year for an executor to get approved on an uncontested probate case. The advisor's hands are tied. You can't really make market changes until a new person's appointed to take care of those decisions, right? So it really helps you to still be that person that can be relied on to do the things that need to be done when they need to be done.
Get you ready for that next stage. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Michelle, so many amazing tips and ideas. Thank you so much. You've taught me a lot.
Awesome.
You've taught me so many cool things. Oh, thank you, Michelle. You're awesome.